Okay, so tonight's workshop, I'm going to talk about my journey out of the public sector, so from the police into being a business owner. I've not done this before. I've talked about it lots of different times, but I haven't actually talked about it as a workshop. What I've done is prepared a number of slides. There's some photographs on there to make it a little bit more interesting, but I've picked out some key learning points from different places along the way. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Zoe Thompson. I'm a coach, trainer, and speaker. My background before doing this was worked with Avon and Somerset Police for 20 years, started at 18 straight out of A levels and left pretty much bang on my 20 years service. So I've been working as a coach now for 6 years. This is my year seven. Year seven will complete in August. And I work with people with personal coaching. I do leadership coaching. I do a lot now, actually, quite a lot of corporate support. It's changed over the years. I'll share more about that this evening, but I do quite a bit of corporate support at the moment, whether that's workshops or coaching or a hybrid mix of the two. And I also run self-development programs. So I focus my coaching and training around strategy, mindset, and confidence, and cover life, leadership, and business. So it's a very big mix. And I'll talk a little bit more about that because the niche is really important. And for me, the variety was really important. Having come out of the police, I wanted to make sure that I had that variety in my work. I didn't want to just be working on one challenge or working with one demographic. So I wanted to have a real mix of the work that I did. So it has been an interesting one for me to niche, but I talk about things and I try and talk about things in the way that people will feel that I'm talking to them so that that connection is there. I said that I've been doing more work with organizations, and these are some of the people that I have, or organizations that I've worked with over the years. I'm going to need to start to make the icons a little bit smaller, but I'm very fortunate to be able to work with lots of different organizations, and not all just public sector ones as well, quite a few now, private sector. Okay, so let's get into the details and the content. So first thing first is shaping the future. If you are thinking about coming out of the public sector, whether that's an exit strategy because you're not happy, or whether it's an exit strategy because you're coming up to retirement, it's really important to understand what it is that you want next. So one of the reasons that's prompted this workshop is I'm in quite a few different groups and I'm looking online to see what people are talking about. And quite a lot of people are talking about leaving the public sector, and they're asking people what is out there that is similar to what they're already doing. Now, that's great if you love what it is that you do. But if you're getting frustrated about the things that you're doing now, you don't want to go into doing that somewhere else, because a lot of the challenges, a lot of the politics will still be the same, even when you're out of the public sector. So if you're thinking about going for a job elsewhere, or you're thinking about running your own business, it's really important to think about what it is that you want, what's important to you, so that when you create your business, you are able to shape all of that. It's one of the best things about running the business is you don't need to go through that chain of command. You don't need to follow the process and the policy, because you are going to write the process and the policy. You need to know what's important. So in business, we quite often use this triangle here. So for those of you that have already got a business, this will probably be familiar to you. And it's the passion, profit, and purpose triangle. So when we're making business decisions, we are trying to hit all 3 points of the triangle. That's the perfect job for us. It pays well, it's doing something that we're passionate about, and it has that sense of purpose to it. That's the perfect job when we're taking different opportunities. So it's really important from a business perspective that we try and hit at least 2 of them. Three is the golden number, but we always want to try and hit 2. So even if it's not something that we're about, if it's something that brings in profit and it has a purpose, then we're hitting 2 sides of the triangle. So it's really important to look at what's important to us. Now, in the same sense, I've done a second triangle because it's really important to think about what your 3 points of the triangle are for you personally. So the first triangle is very much for business. The second triangle is very much for you as an individual. So understanding what your values are, but also what your logistical, psychological, and emotional needs from work are. This is why it can be really important to really get that clarity on why you're leaving the public sector, and sit and brainstorm or journal if that's what you do, or just to get that information out and be really clear why it is that you're leaving, so that when you're designing your business, you can take all of that into consideration. It's very normal as humans that we will follow a pattern. We'll go with what's familiar to us, and it can be really easy to step into business and start to mirror what we did in the public sector, because that's what we're familiar with. And we know it works to a sense, but it might not work for us as individuals. So for me, I have the triangle for passion, purpose, and profit, but I also have a second triangle that is my values. So my values are making a difference, positivity, and continuous improvement. So when I'm looking at work and work opportunities, I want to make sure that they hit 2 points of that triangle. So quite often it will be 2, occasionally it's all 3. But I want to make sure that the work that I do aligns with what's really important to me. You can also pick 3 that are around the logistics or around what meets your needs. So it might be that you mix up the 2. But this is something that I've done with clients as well, is help them to understand what their 3 points of the triangle are. I've had this conversation with my son around looking at what basketball team he might play for. So like, what are the 3 things that are most important to you? Is it the coach? Is it the team dynamic? Is it the pay? Is it what happens on court? Is it what happens off court? Is it the approach of the coach? What are the 3 things that are most important for you? Because then you can go and make a decision based on what options you have. But if you're not clear on what you're measuring success by, everything becomes an opportunity. And when you're going into business, it can be very easy. And certainly for the first couple of years, you're probably going to take all of the opportunities that come your way. And then you'll start to work out what it is that you want, what it is that you enjoy doing. But if you don't start to shape what's important to you, it means that you have then got the risk of going down a different route that doesn't align with your values. It doesn't meet your needs, and the logistics are way off what is going to be sustainable for you. So going back to the reasons why you are either looking to leave the public sector or you have left the public sector will help to shape that. What needs are not being met? What values are out of alignment? What are the logistics that aren't working for you? And then you can turn that into what it is that you do want to start to shape your business around. So it's an important part of the business model. Okay, next up, from side hustle to full-time business. So I had my business in creation when I was made redundant. So my redundancy was in 2017 and came completely out of the blue. So I had been told previously that the project program that I was working on, that the budget was there, it had been signed off at board level for the next 2 years. And all of that was true. I had assumed that I would be in that model for the next 2 years. I assumed incorrectly, because within that model, they were making some changes, and part of those changes was that my role was going to be going. So it was a complete shock to me. And for those of you that know the Kubler-Ross change curve, I bounced around that curve a lot. I had the acceptance, okay, that's fine, I'm going. Then I had the, well, we're going to redeploy you because you're too good to lose. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, I don't want to stay now. I've already made that decision. And I bounced and bounced and bounced around it. And it was a really difficult time for a lot of reasons. I'd been there 20 years. I was 18 when I first started. All of my adult memories are attached to Avon and Somerset, the department I was in when that happened, the people that I was working with when that happened. So much of my adult growth is attached to the roles that I was in. So the redundancy for me wasn't just about losing the job. It was a separation of that identity that I knew. You know, I knew who I was in those roles and in that organization. I didn't know who I was going to be when I came out of it. But what I did have was a business idea, which is where a lot of you will be right now. I had what can probably be best described as well, I had a hobby with a logo. So I'd had the logo designed and I had an idea of what it was that I wanted to do, although it's not actually what I'm doing now. And I had compressed my hours previously to be able to work on this idea and do some training and develop in coaching. But I didn't have anything more than that. It wasn't earning any money. I didn't have any clients. And I wasn't registered as a business at that point. So I had a side hobby. It wasn't a hustle. But what I did have was the redundancy notice period to hustle and then to be able to create the full-time business. So what I would say is, with it, whether it's a side hustle or a full-time business, it's going to need a lot of effort and energy. For you to create it, design it, get it off the ground, it needs time management, because if you're doing this around your day job, you have to manage your time to be able to do that. But if you're then doing this as your full-time work, you need to be able to manage your time, because it can very quickly consume all of your waking hours. It will just become your go-to. So you have to put some boundaries around your time management, whether you're working full-time, part-time and building this, or whether you're out and now working on this full-time. So managing your time and that commitment around that is really important. So it's really important to set your priorities and what your key activities are. The to-do list as a business owner is never done. I never got to the bottom of a to-do list. There is always something to do. There is always something that needs to be done reactively, and there are always things that need to be done proactively. So there needs to be some acceptance from the beginning that you will never get to the bottom of your to-do list, and you will probably never feel like you're completely on top of things. And if you can accept that early on, that will help you to boundary the amount of time and energy you put into it, because you don't want to burn yourself into the ground trying to get this off the ground. So it's really important to look after yourself in the process. One of the better things about self-employment is you get to choose the flexibility. You don't have to put in a flexible working request. It doesn't need to go through a manager. You get to choose the hours that you work. So making sure that you build in time and flexibility to make it work for you is really important. So one of the things that I do, I'm not a people person in the morning. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I am not great with people first thing in the morning. So as a coach and as a trainer, that's not going to work for me. Although I did do a session at 9:30 this morning, but I'd been up for a couple of hours, I'd had my coffee, I was good to go. But I choose not to see clients in the morning. I get up, I do my admin for a couple of hours, I do my focus work for a couple of hours, because that's when my concentration levels are so much better. I then go to the gym, and then I see clients in the afternoon and the evening. That works well for me because clients want appointments in the evening because they're working during the day. So that then means that I stagger out that work and I make it work for me. What it also means is that I am consistent in my routine, and that I can then be disciplined with that routine that works really well for me. So I will cover this in different workshops. There's a time management one coming up, and I'm quite happy to share how I do it, but how I do it possibly won't work for you, because you're going to have your own priorities and your own routine that you want to set. But being able to be consistent makes it much easier to be disciplined. So if you can create a routine that works for you and builds in the things that are really important to you, then that's going to help. So these 3 pictures were all taken in Cyprus. So I've worked out in Cyprus twice a year for the last couple of years. I'm out there for a couple of weeks at a time, but I still work while I'm there. But I get up in the morning, have my coffee, I sit in the sun, keep the dog company. Then I go for then I sit and do my admin. Then I go for a walk, and then I come back and I'm with clients for the rest of the day. And I do a lot of planning while I'm out there. So there's a 2 hour time difference. So that means I get an extra 2 hours in the morning because of the time difference that gives me time to work on the business. So I've got flip charts over there, post-it notes over there, exactly the same as I've got here, so that I can work on the business. But it means even when I'm away, I've got the same routine so that I can still be consistent, which means I can still show up. It took me a little while to get into that habit of not just sitting down at the desk every morning and getting on with things, of learning to be able to be even more flexible than feels real. But build in the things that are really important to you first, and then build in the work around it. That would definitely be one piece of advice. When you look at your calendar for the week, build in all of the things that are important, whether that's gym or running or family time, or time with friends, or that coffee, that lunch catch up. Build all of that in first, and then let your work around it. You won't get any more flexible than running your own business. So when we talk about taking the leap, and we talk about knowing when you're ready for transition. Now, for me, I didn't really have the choice. I mean, I could have gone and got a job elsewhere, but that would have been a similar size of change, because I'd only really worked for Avon and Somerset, and I'd been there 20 years. So for me to go and work in another company, that would have been also a significant change. For those of you that are thinking about how will you know when you're ready to take that leap, it's really important to get that clarity around what that needs to look like. So it might be around finances, it might be around logistics. You'll all have different reasons that will help you to know when you're ready. So if you are building and you've got a side hustle at the moment, your business is building alongside your day job, it might be that you start to have regular months with an income that you know is manageable for you if you were to step away. There might be something in your timeline like retirement, or there might be something in your timeline that's going to give you a time of when you want to step over. The chances are you'll never feel fully ready. So in terms of knowing when it's time to take the leap, it's probably going to be more of a logistical decision than it is going to be an emotional decision, because it's a very, very different change. There's lots of things that won't be familiar to you. There'll be lots of unknowns, and there'll be lots of working it out as you go along. And I've put in a different variation of the learning curve down the bottom. That's kind of how it is with business. And when you get familiar with what you're doing, either the business brings in something new, or circumstances change, or you see an opportunity, or something happens, cost of living crisis, and you have to pivot and you have to respond to that. So even when you know your business inside and out, there will often be external circumstances that are going to help or force you to create a shift and create those changes. So I don't know that you ever will feel fully ready. It will probably be more of a logistical decision, but think about the emotional considerations as well. Think about what else you need to take into consideration to that change. Was that a question? No, background noise. So knowing when you're ready for the transition can be really difficult. I think for a lot of people, they set a date to work to and then work towards that date. Whether that date is in 5 months, 5 years, or 10 years, there will be things that you can do now to start to build that business. There's lots of things that take a lot longer than you will expect. Now, patience is not my strong point, and so I get really impatient when things don't happen. Start now. Start now, start messy. Don't wait until you feel a certain way to take action. Start looking at the actions that you can take. The feelings will follow, but you will probably find that it will be a logistical decision before it will be an emotional decision. So take the leap, make that decision when the logistics are right, and know that the emotional things that you want to feel about it will follow probably quite soon afterwards. Crafting the business plan. So this is something that I've almost learned back to front, because when I started, I had a plan, but I didn't have a business plan. And it's probably something that I've only really learned more so in the last couple of years. But it is really important to define what your business goals are and to look at different income streams. Depending on what type of business you've got, there will be lots of different opportunities for having different income streams. And the general sort of advice and recommendations is to have a couple of different income streams so you're not reliant on one source. Don't be reliant on one client. So if you do corporate work, don't be reliant on one corporate organization. Don't have one income stream because it leaves you wide open. It's a lot higher risk. So you want to be able to have multiple income streams. You want ideally a mix of one-to-one as well as one-to-many or group work. Whether you're looking at online or in person, all of these will shape what your business model wants to look like. You might only want to work with people one-to-one. You might only want to work with people online. You might only want to work with people in person. You might only want to do group work. Think about what you want to do. How are you at your best? And what do you want to do in terms of different income streams? But the more income streams, the better. So it means you're not leaving yourselves wide open. It was something that a lot of people experienced during COVID, was having that one income stream that was no longer viable because of lockdown rules or because of changes that were happening. So having that variation is really important. Horizon scanning and risk assessment. And I know it's the standing joke that the police get surprised when New Year's Eve comes round every year. And I know that actually I think, and I can only really speak for the police, that planning in advance is not something that I would say is, I mean, it may well have changed, but I know certainly in a lot of the departments I worked in reactive departments. So I worked in the control room, in the major crime investigation team. There's not really much prevention you can do in teams like that. So certainly not that fell within our responsibility. The prevention work was done elsewhere. But a lot of the teams and departments that I worked in were reactive departments. So that's where I'm at my strongest. When COVID happened, I was all over that. It was chaotic, it was disruptive, and it meant I could step into my comfort zone of reacting to everything. Ask me to sit down and plan for 12 months ahead. I really struggle with that because that was not something that I ever did in the roles that I did up until the last couple of roles that I had where I was in project and program management, which is why I have this love for brown paper and post-it notes to be able to plan it out, because having worked with project teams, to be able to look at different work streams and to be able to map it all out and timeline it. But horizon scanning and risk assessment is really important. And you're assessing for the opportunities as much as you're assessing for the risks. So looking to see what's happening in your industry, what are other people doing, what do you know that's coming down the pipeline of the next few months that might give you some opportunities within your business, or that might potentially be a risk to your business. So developing those strategic planning skills and being able to adapt to change is an interesting one. I think a lot of public sector people are really good at adapting to change because change happens all the time. That's going to be a strength. For many of us, the strategic planning, unless you've worked in those kind of departments, is maybe something that isn't to your strength. Know where your strengths are and know where you need to perhaps fill in some knowledge gaps or skills and experience gaps to be able to do that. I'm getting better at planning, but it's not something that I jump at. When I see it's in the diary, it's something that I have to be really disciplined with. It's definitely not something that I look forward to. But if something pops up and there's an opportunity to create and react, I jump at it because that's where I'm in my comfort zone. And dependent on the jobs and the roles that you've had will depend on where your strengths are as well. Play to your strengths for sure. So creating a personal brand. So I mentioned earlier that I'm doing a lot more corporate work now. I made the conscious decision to move away from that when I first started. And I certainly moved away from anything that was relating to the police. And that was for a couple of reasons. One was probably still a little bit hurt and a little bit bitter about the redundancy, if I'm being totally honest. And I just really wanted to step away from it and put some distance between me and that world. But also, I needed for me to create an identity away from being 8952 Thompson. I needed to step away and create that identity for myself. Who am I when I'm not in those roles? Who am I when I'm not a leader or a manager? Or who am I when I'm not in an organization that I know really well and can live and breathe it? I needed to step away from that to be able to spend a little bit of time working out who I was outside of that environment and then who I wanted to be and shape into as a business owner. So for me, that change of coming out of the public sector into being a business owner was as much about shaping identity as it was about shaping the business as well, because I wanted to work out who did I want to be? How did I want to show up in the world? How did I want people to see me and experience working with me? And that was really important. And I needed to distance myself from those years in the police to be able to do that. As the years have gone on and I've found that and I've worked that out and I've got confident with that, I now feel that I'm able to step back into those spaces in my new identity rather than stepping back in as the old version of me. So that's really important. And it might be that you have similar challenges in coming out of that organization, especially if you've been there for a long time, but especially if you're attached to the roles that you've been in. But leveraging your past experiences for your branding and your messaging is really important. Working in the public sector, often you're in positions of trust, you're in positions of credibility. And so when we're looking as business owners in building rapport and building relationships with people, it's the like, know, and trust factor that we're building. So people buy from people. Even within those organizations, bigger organizations, we still connect with people and people buy from people. And when you've got previous experience in the public sector, as government workers, civil servants, you've been in positions of trust, you've been in positions of responsibility, and that adds to your credibility. But you'll get to decide how much you want to play on that. Some people talk about it all of the time. Some people talk about it some of the time. And I, for years, didn't talk about it any of the time. I would bump into people and they wouldn't know that that's what I'd done. That was by choice. I'm talking about it a lot more. The challenge for me has often been around the difference between privacy and being visible online. And I think there's a difference between privacy and secrecy. You need to give enough about yourself away that people get to feel like they know you and they connect with you. So you've got to give something and you've got to be visible. You have to be a lot more visible than you probably think you do, because of the way social media works, because of the way that algorithms work. Even if you show up online every day, only 1 to 2% of your audience are going to see you. So you have to keep showing up. And you'll show up to empty rooms. You'll do lives where nobody speaks, nobody watches, and you have to keep showing up. You have to be visible. You have to keep showing up in different places so that people get to know you. And you'll also have to keep repeating yourself a lot of the time, because people will meet you, online, or they'll get to know you through an introduction in a network event. But after that, they forget. They might remember that they met someone that works in this particular industry, but they might not remember you and they might not remember your brand. So it's really important to keep showing up, keep being visible, keep repeating who you are, what you do, who you help, and get things across that are going to be those hooks that people will remember. I don't share a lot online personally, not from private accounts or from work accounts. I have started sharing a little bit more, but I choose what I share. It's enough to give people that feeling of getting to know me, getting to know my character, getting to know what I'm like, but it's not the full ins and outs of everything that I am up to. And quite often I'll post retrospectively as well for security reasons, just as much as anything else. But when you're creating your personal brand, you get to make all of these decisions. There's no corporate communications department that's going to tell you what you have to post and how you post and what you can say and what you can't say. You get to make those decisions. So thinking about your own branding and creating your own personal brand, have a think about what you want to be visible online. But you will need to be very visible, which coming from the public sector, especially when we talk about social media, is one of the biggest challenges, because most people on social media will either have names that are not theirs or spelt back to front or jibbled around. You probably won't have a profile picture that shows you. It might be you sitting on the beach with your back to the camera. You probably won't share too much about what you do, but also it's similar when you go to networking events. I found it really, really challenging saying my name and what I did, because for years I would read the room before I mentioned who I worked for, let alone the job that I did. So it's a real change in terms of creating that personal brand and getting really comfortable and confident talking openly about it, because you don't need to read the room. You almost need to tell anybody and everybody who you are and what you do. And that's a real challenge, especially if you've gone for a very long time in not doing that and being very aware of what you say and how much you give away when you're in rooms of people. It's taken me a long time to work that bit out. And having had conversations with other people, I know that's not just been a challenge for me. Your personal brand, you'll have your business brand, but your personal brand will be very much a part of that. But you get to choose. You get to decide what you share and how you share it and how you put those into posts. A lot of people will also talk about not being too vanilla and not being too kind of generic. And that's again another challenge, because public sector, the last thing you're really allowed to do is speak very openly about things that you hold strong opinions about. From a branding point of view, what we call secondary messaging. So your primary messaging is what you do and how you do it. The secondary messaging is who you are and the things that are important to you. But they are quite often the things that will split and divide opinion. It will either be it will be something that somebody really loves and respects you for, and it'll be the other thing that it will be something that somebody else can no longer connect with you because it's too different to what they're looking for. That's the aim with personal branding. That is the aim. You want to repel the people that aren't going to be good clients for you, and you want to connect and attract the people who are. And that's a really interesting shift and a really interesting dynamic. I find it really hard. I would say that I probably don't put much out there that divides opinion, but then I don't think that I'm generally like that anyway. I am quite open in my views. I don't hold particularly strong views about certain things, so it doesn't tend to come through in my messaging. There's not much that I kind of get on a ranty soapbox with, because I'm not really a ranty soapbox person the majority of the time. If I am, it's because I haven't had enough coffee or it's too early in the morning. But part of your personal branding is part of that, of being able to talk to the things that are important to you. So for me, looking at mine, my sort of secondary messaging are around the balance of being a working parent and still being ambitious, the balance of running a business, being a parent, and still being fit and healthy. That is what tends to come through in my secondary messaging. It's not particularly going to divide a lot of people, but there will be some people who don't agree with that, and that will be their decision of whether or not they connect. So think about what your personal brand is. What messaging do you want to put out there? What do you want people to connect with? The importance of support. So I mentioned this in the blog when I started. So I launched the business in August. So my redundancy became live on August the 1st. And so I launched the business on August the 1st. After months of frantically watching HMRC webinars on how to register a business and how to run a business and how to register for tax and all the incredibly boring things that you need to get your head around. And in fact, I didn't get my head around it very well because I ended up registering for lots of things that I didn't need to actually register for, and then ended up having to undo a lot of it a little bit later on. I think it's that police habit of declaring everything and making sure that everybody knows everything to make sure that you've got yourself covered, and it wasn't needed. But August the 1st, I went live and I had a conversation. I remember those conversations really clearly of saying to people, don't let me back down on this until Christmas. Like, let me make sure that I give it 100% between now and Christmas, and then I'll take a step back at Christmas, see how it's going, and if I need to start applying for another job, I'm not going to do anything until after Christmas. So I gave myself a really clear time frame of giving it everything and seeing what happened. And I think sometimes that can be the challenge if you're doing this alongside full-time employment, that sometimes gives you a permission to let things go a little bit longer. Whereas with the redundancy, or when you've got a date, you've got something to push and to work for. But find that support, and not just people within the business, but people that are going to be around you as well. Find the people who are going to help you hold yourself accountable, the people who are going to challenge you to stay on track. From an accountability partner point of view, you don't want somebody who's just going to say, oh, don't worry, you can just do it next week. You want somebody who's going to challenge why that's not been done and keep pushing you to do what you said you were going to do. But find mentors and peers within the business world as well. The three people, I am one of those three people, but the picture on the left, Helen and Nick, I've done lots of work with over the years, and it's more of a friendship now than it is business partnership. But we work really well together. We've all got our own strengths, and we've also got things that we look at to each other to be able to support each other in being able to do that. So I always go to Nick when I need to be able to sort of look at business plans and things like that. And Nick's from a sales background. So when I'm struggling with wording sales messaging and things like that, I go to Nick. Helen is all about the brain. She's a hypnotherapist. So whenever there's confidence or mindset struggles, she's a great person to speak to. But we also do lots of work together as well. One thing that you will soon notice in business is that people will only tell you the shiny stuff. Very few people in business will share their reality. I had been going to networking events for about 6 months before I realized that other people had income streams other than running a business. I had just assumed that people were self-employed and that was it. And it wasn't until somebody pointed out to me that most people around the table had a partner who was able to cover the bills, so that took the pressure off. Or some people had property that they rented, or some people, other people around the table weren't paying their bills solely by the income from their business. And I had a little bit of a moment at that point thinking, okay, so I'm actually not doing too badly because I am paying the bills purely from money from the business. And I'm a single parent, sole earner. It was all down to me. And I think that actually really helped because it meant that I didn't come into it with a mindset of this being optional. It was, okay, if I'm doing this, I need to do this and I need to make it work. I gave myself till Christmas. I did do a review at Christmas, but not from a point of, do I need to find a day job? That has never happened. And I know a lot of business owners say that quite often they will have times where things get really tough and they will start to look at jobs and adverts. I know that happens. That's not happened for me. I don't know why that is, probably because there's always been enough there for me to keep going, or there's been something on the horizon to be able to focus on. There's definitely been lots of wobbles, I'm not going to deny that, but not to the point where I've felt the need to go and work elsewhere. But Nick shares quite openly, he had a part-time job with Tesco as a delivery driver. Helen has part-time work in a school. So, you know, people have part-time jobs and run their businesses, even when they will promote themselves on LinkedIn, talk about things in networking, they'll be there to promote their business, but quite often they will have second incomes to be able to support that and take the pressure off. So don't dismiss that as an option. You're going self-employed, you are looking at running your own business, but don't think that you can't go and get a couple of hours, you know, of extra work just to take the pressure off, because from a mental health, emotional health point of view, that might make all the difference. And you want to be able to enjoy running your business. You know, this is your choice to run the business. You want to be able to enjoy it. So if it does mean that you have that extra to give you that little bit of take the pressure off, then that's always going to be an option. But find your mentors, find your peers, and surround yourself with the authentic people who are going to tell you the truth. You know, you want to make sure that what you're hearing from other people is helpful, but is also truthful. You need to know when other people are having their wobbles and bumps, because it helps you to feel that you're not on your own. And you can use your networks for learning and growth. The picture on the right-hand side are some of the people from my community group. So technically they're clients, but they all network and support each other as much as they look to me for support. And actually it's often interesting watching them in group coaching sessions that they will ask each other coaching style questions that I know they've used in sessions with me, where they're learning to be able to do that and support each other. But it's really important to find yourself a network, and I don't necessarily mean networking groups, because they can be quite inauthentic. People are there for a reason. It's very purposeful. People will be very friendly, but it's probably not going to be where you make friends. You might get to know people over time. People will be friendly, but people are very much there for a purpose. They're there to make the connections for their business. And a lot of people who turn up to networking are very intentional about their time in the room. They'll have a list of who they want to connect with, or they'll have a list of businesses that they want to connect with that are going to help them and their business. So if you do go to networking, you'll probably want to do the same. You'll want to be quite purposeful, quite intentional, because otherwise it makes it for a very expensive breakfast. So you want to make sure that you get best use of your time in making those connections in the room. But you don't have to do that at networking meetings. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can find Facebook groups that have got people in there that you want to connect with, but also think about who else is seeing your people. So say, for example, like a physiotherapist. Like the physio knows what they can do to help people, but the person who's injured may not think of a physiotherapist first. They might think of the doctor first. They might think of, you know, various other options before they think of seeing a physio. Who are your people seeing? So if you're trying to think of different examples, but if for me, if I'm thinking of coaching, I know that some people will think of a counselor before they'll think of a coach. I know that some people will look at holistic therapies before they think of seeing a coach. So, the example that my coach used with me is like somebody who has a headache. They know they have a headache. They might think of lots of different options to work out what's going to fix that headache. And you might be one of those options. So who else might they be going to? Who else might they be talking to? Had a conversation with a client this week, talking about making jewelry. And we were talking about wedding jewelry as being potentially one of those options. So we were talking about who they might be able to connect with in the wedding industry, who might be able to refer people to them. So if you're going to make wedding rings, who do you need to speak to, and who else are they speaking to that you can connect with? Because that's how you'll also build your potential partnership network. Okay, adapting to change and evolving. I think something that as public sector we're very good at. I mean, let's look at the 12 months that are ahead. So we've just had a change in some of our local officials. We've had changes of PCCs for a lot of the police forces. That's going to direct change. We've got a general election coming up at some point. We don't know when, but that is going to potentially create change. It's either going to create change because the same government stay in and they're going to have new policies that they want to implement, or we might have a new government come in and they're going to want to create change. Creating change, working with change is something in the public sector we deal with a lot. And that's going to set you up really well for working in business. The resilience and adaptability from the public sector is going to serve you well as a business owner, being able to flex and adapt and respond and pick yourself up and keep going is going to be just as important running a business as it is in the jobs that you've been doing in the public sector. Embracing failure and learning from setbacks. This will probably feel a little bit different because it's not something that happens as much as it would be helpful to for a lot of us in day jobs, because we worry about losing our jobs. So being able to hold your hands up and say, actually, I didn't get that right, or I should have made a different decision, is not always a safe space to be able to do that. But in business, you're only really answering to yourself. So actually sitting there and going, that wasn't a great decision, and being able to reflect on that and think, okay, what would I do differently next time is going to be really important. One of the first things I did, 2018, you can see there on this image, was I invested a fair bit of money in having an app designed. Now, on paper, it was a great idea. People were journaling, people were looking for things that they could use on their mobile devices. On paper, from the research that I did, gaps in the market, it was a really good idea. And I had a place with some funding to be able to research and review it. The app itself, I still stand by, was a good idea. Unfortunately, the person that I chose to do the technology behind the app was not such a good idea. And they failed to keep up with the technology upgrades and everything else that needs to be doing. And it very quickly became quite flat and people weren't using it. So it goes down as a fail. But there's lots of lessons in that as well. The middle picture, I was commissioned to write a course and a course of modules and videos. I was asked by a company to put it together. We did the filming. I did all of the workbooks, put it all together, and then they just completely ghosted me, like just completely dropped off, didn't answer messages, wouldn't like. I just couldn't get hold of them, couldn't speak to them. So that would go down technically as a fail. But what I did was I thought, well, actually, I've written the content and the videos are me. So what I'll do is I'll repurpose that, take their branding off. They've not paid me for anything. So it's my content that I've written anyway. Rebranded it and put that out as an online course. And it was actually the stepping stone into some of the other programs that I then went on to run. So it sowed the seed to be able to do something else that I might not have come up with at that point. So technically a failure, there was no earning at that point from it, but it was a really good stepping stone into exploring something else. And COVID, that in terms of change and evolving, I was really fortunate with COVID because I was already online. So when I designed the business, going back to that first slide, when I designed the business, it was really important to me that coaching was accessible and therefore inclusive. So that meant that I provided online coaching. So this was back in 2018. And not a lot of people were coaching online at that point. Most people were coaching in person. It was so new that when I was sending people links, so this was before Zoom, although I was using Zoom when COVID happened, I would have to explain to people how they would need to set up their video call and how it would work. But it meant that I could work with people online, which meant then that people didn't have to find childcare or parking and all of those other things that become a logistical difficulty. So it meant when COVID happened, I was already online. I already had programs that were running online. I was coaching one-to-one online. So actually, when COVID happened, I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to pivot or change anything in my business to accommodate COVID. At that point, I had 3 people that I was seeing in person. So one of them was for social anxiety. So he messaged me and said, well, if I can't go out and socialize, there's no anxiety, so I don't need to see you anymore. So he dropped off straight away. And the other 2 changed over to online. And then I had nothing else that I needed to do. But that was a challenge in itself because I was, on LinkedIn and I was watching all of these other businesses starting to implement all of these new things, but they were actually things that I already had in place. So sometimes not changing is the good thing to do, but also being open to change is really important. And that will keep you evolving. It will keep your business changing, and it will keep your business growing, and it will keep you personally evolving as well. And that's really important because otherwise you want to keep the business fresh. You want to be able to seize the opportunities as they come through, and you want to keep growing and developing and training, because that means that what people get from you when they pay to work with you, they get the better version of you, for want of a better word. So also, it's really important to recognize your achievements, and this will look different for different people. Knowing what good looks like is really important. So for some people, it's going to be income. For some people, it's going to be the amount that you earn, or it might be a particular number of clients you work with, or it might be a particular business that you want to work with, or it might be a particular opportunity or something that you've seen somebody else do. It will be different for different people. So determine right from the beginning, what does good look like for you? What does success look like for you? Then you are able to acknowledge your progress and look at those milestones. So it's really important to find the fulfillment beyond the financial gain. And that's really important because your financial gain is going to fluctuate. You're not going to have the same wage on the 28th of every month. You're going to have different money coming in at different points, and you'll have some months where it's really high and some months where it's really low. So if you're attaching your measure of success to the finances that come in, it means that those measures of success, you might have had a really good month, worked with some really good people, got some really good results. But if those invoices aren't paid until the following month, then it's going to create that disconnect of what you're measuring as successful. So for me, there's been lots of successes over the years. These are the more recent ones. So the one on the right hand side was a recent event in London. I had looked at the event beforehand, and they'd actually put 2 coaches on at the same time covering the same topic. And when I got there, I was really nervous about whether or not people would show up, because I knew that there was a coach in the room on a different stage talking about the same topic. But I had a full house. I had full house and standing room around the sides. So that for me was a measure of success, was that people had looked at what I was talking about and made that choice to come and hear. The other 2 are being able to go to different countries and work. So the middle picture was Amsterdam last year, fantastic opportunity. And I'm off to Milan in June this year to speak. Again, my measures of success, but I measure my success around balance. So being able to travel and work. So I mentioned earlier, I go to Cyprus twice a year. This year, my challenge is to travel somewhere every month. It might be within the UK, but to go somewhere every month and be able to balance working, but also having some time away as well. So that for me is balance. And that for me is how I measure success, but also the achievements are in there as well. This year I got my accreditation for Master Coach, so that was a big milestone for me. Yeah, it's all very well clients telling you that you're good, but actually an independent body that assesses you and assesses you against those criteria and says that you're good, then that's a different one again. But know what you want to achieve. How do you want to measure your success? What do you want that to look like? And then you can work out where those milestones are to make sure that you recognize them when they happen. Okay, final slide. Thank you for staying with me so far. The final slide is whether or not entrepreneurship, it's very hard to say, that was a slight Bristolian accent slip through there, is it for you? So depending on what stage you are at, you will all be potentially at different stages. You might be at the startup stage of having an idea, pursuing or exploring the options of whether or not you want to be self-employed. It might be that you've got a business idea and you're running that as a side hustle alongside your paid employment, or you might have recently left. Having a think about what it is that you want and what that looks like. So even if you're growing your business, there are a couple of resources here for those of you who are aspiring or already business owners. So what we've got here is you can book in a call with me. I will send all of this through to you via email later on. There is a Facebook that you can join. There is a free download, which I will send to you later. And coming soon is a podcast. So I'm going to be interviewing different people from the public sector who are now full-time business owners. And we'll be talking about their journey, what their learnings were. That's coming soon, probably be launched in the summer. So watch this space for that. And if you know somebody who you think would make a really good guest, let me know, or if please do feel free to do an introduction and we will get them booked on. So that is it from me. Thank you. Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving me your time. At this point, I would invite you to write down your light bulb and your next step, so that we can capture, or you can capture, what you have learnt, what you are taking away this evening, and what you are going to do. So now you know what you know. What are you going to take away and do as a result? So make a note of that. I'm going to stop the recording at this point so I can bring people back into the room for any questions. If you're watching this back, please feel free to message me your questions. You can contact me via email, or you can contact me, come and join the Facebook group and you can ask your questions there. But thank you very much for your time. I hope there's been some things of value in there, for some learnings from my journey that will help you on yours. But if I can help you in any way, please do not hesitate to ask. I will be more than happy to help.